Alright, so today is point-slope form. We already learned about slope-intercept form, and it kind of makes sense because to write a y equals mx plus b equation, you need slope and you need the y-intercept. It's called slope-intercept. You need slope, you need the y-intercept. So today we're going to be learning about point-slope form. So we're going to need a point and the slope. Alright, so the point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, where the point comes into play is we're going to plug in the point, the x from our point here and the y from our point here. And our slope will be plugged in here for m. And once you do that, you have an equation in point-slope form. To me, this is my favorite. I think it's the easiest, so hopefully you'll agree with me. All right, so I'm going to do it straight from the formula first, and then I'm going to show you the way that I think about it whenever I'm doing it myself. Okay, first of all, I'm going to write y minus. So y minus, and then I'm going to put the y from my point. Well, here's my point. The y is -7. Then we put an equal sign, and then we put the slope, which tells me the slope is a -1/4. After slope, we put the parenthesis x minus. And then we put the x from our point. Well, the x from our point is a 4. Okay, the only thing I do not like about how this is written right now is we have a minus and negative. Well, we know a minus and negative is a plus. So really I want this written as y plus 7 equals -1/4 x minus 4. And that's what it is in point-slope form. We're done.
How are your nerves?
I'm recording. Sorry. Okay, so one thing I want you to notice is look at our x value from our point. It was a +4 and we ended up having a -4. Our y value was a -7. I ended up putting a +7. And that's the way I like to think about it when I'm doing it, because if you're looking up here, remember sometimes I told you to think of minus signs as the opposite of. So really I like to do it as y, put the opposite of my y value, and then over here write x, put the opposite of my x value. Okay, so on the second one I'm going to do it that way. So y, and I'm going to put the opposite of my y value. So if it's a +9, I'm going to write a -9. Put an equal sign. After the equal sign, we put our slope, which it tells me the slope is a +2. Parentheses, we're going to write x, and then we're going to put the opposite of our x value. Well, since it's a -3, I'm going to put a +3. And that's what point-slope form looks like. Okay, on this one, they already give me two equations that are already written in point-slope form. So what it's asking me to do is identify the slope. So it's asking me to identify m and to list the one point that they used. Okay, so slope. If we look up at our formula, we know the slope is m. It comes after the equal sign and in front of the parentheses. So right here is where I'm looking for slope. So on problem A, I know my slope is 5. And on problem B, my slope would be 1/2. Okay, so now let's identify the point they use in each equation. So I know on problem A, the x from my point is going to come from the number that's by the x. My y of my point is going to come from the number by the y. Okay, so this is going to be my x value, but remember it's opposite. So if I see a -2, I know my x value is a +2. So my y value, since I see a +1, I know I'm going to put a -1. Okay, on problem B, I look by the number by the x. That's going to be the x value from my point. It's going to help me identify that. The number beside the y is going to help me identify the y value of my point. Okay, the number by the x is a +5, so I know my x value will be a -5. The number by the y is a +3, so I know my y value is a -3. Okay, so you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. Let's go ahead and write what point-slope form looks like right above here. Okay, so in point slope form, I need a point, which it gives me 2 points, so I'm good on that part, but it does not give me the slope. So we need to find the slope between these 2 points. So remember I told you to put a fraction bar with a minus sign on top and bottom, and we do y's rise. So I look at this point right here. I know the y value is the 1, so the 1 will go on top, the -3 will drop below it. Move on to your second point. The y rises, so this 4 will go on top, the 6 will drop below it. So on the top, I know 1 minus 4 is a -3. On the bottom, -3 minus 6 is a -9. And that's going to simplify to be 1/3. So what we just found is slope. All right, so it doesn't matter which point we use. We have 2 points. We're going to choose one, okay? So I'm going to pick this one, 6, 4. Why not? So I'm going to use this point and this slope to write my equation. So I write y, and then I look at the y value of the point that I chose. It's a +4, so I'm going to put a -4. We put an equal sign followed by our slope, open parentheses, write x, then look at the x value of the point that we chose. It's a +6, so I'm going to write -6. All right, so that's what point slope form looks like. Now what we're going to do is we're going to change it from point slope form into slope intercept form, y equals mx plus b. The equations would look different, but they would make the exact same line. So an example I would give is if I give somebody a dollar bill and I give somebody 4 quarters, it's no different. It's both a dollar, they just look different. So the equation in point slope form will be the exact same line as the equation in y equals mx plus b form. They'll look different, but they're the exact same line. All right, so I'm going to rewrite it. Y minus 4 equals 1/3 x minus 6. Sorry, 1/3 times x minus 6. Okay, the first thing I'm going to want to do is distribute my 1/3. So 1/3 times x is a 1/3 x. 1/3 times a -6 gives me a -2. My y minus 4 on the other side drops down. Okay, so we're almost there. The only thing I have left to do is to get rid of this -4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I have y equals 1/3 x, -2 plus 4 is a +2. So these two equations form the same exact line, but they're just written in 2 different forms. All right, let's graph this guy. I know in slope-intercept form it gives me my slope and it gives me my y-intercept. So my slope is a 1/3. My y-intercept is a 0, 2. All right, I'm going to zoom in some. So on my graph, I'm going to put go on my y-axis and put a dot at 2. Slope tells me how to rise over how to run. So from this point right here, I'm going to rise 1, run 3, put a new dot. Do it again from here. Rise 1, run 3, put a new dot. Do it again. Rise 1, run 3. Oops. Okay. So I have no more room to go forward, so now if I want to go backwards, remember if I'm going to go backwards, I'm going to do everything in reverse. So instead of going rising 1, running 3, I'm going to go down 1, back 3, down 1, back 3. Do it again, down 1, back 3. Okay, then use a straight edge of some type to line your points up and draw a line that goes clear across your graph. Okay, now that we have our line drawn, we can look to see where it crosses the x-axis. Well, I see it crosses the x here at -6, so my x-intercept is -6, 0. Okay, so we're going to write our equation in point slope form. Remember, that's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay, so we need a point and we need the slope. So we have 2 points that it gave us, so that's nice, but we do not have the slope, so we're going to have to calculate that. We start with our fraction bar with a minus sign on top and bottom. We do y's rise, so if I'm looking at this point right here, my y is 1, so the 1 goes on top, the negative 10 drops below it. Move on to your second point, the y rises, so my y is negative 7, that goes on top, the 6 drops below it. And we calculate. We know a minus and negative is a plus, so 1 plus 7 is 8. Negative 10 minus 6 is a negative 16. So it's going to give me a negative 1/2 slope. And now that we have our slope, we just need to pick one of those points. It does not matter, so I'm going to pick this second point. So we have our point, we have our slope, we can write our equation. So y, then we look at the y value. Our y value is a negative 7, so I'm going to write a plus 7 equals. After our equal sign, we put our slope, which is a negative 1/2, open parentheses, x. After we write x, we look at the x value from our point. It's a positive 6, so I'm going to write a minus 6. And there it is, point slope form. Okay, so let's see what this equation in point slope form would look like as slope intercept form. So we're going to change it into y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to rewrite this guy. First step is I'm going to distribute, so negative 1/2 times x is a negative 1/2 x. Negative 1/2 times a negative 6 is a positive 3. My y plus 7 on the other side drops down. All I have left to do is get rid of this plus 7, and I'm going to do that by subtracting 7 on both sides. So I have y equals negative 1/2 x. 3 minus 7 is a negative 4, so minus 4. All right, and there it is. So remember, these forms, the way I have these two equations written, they look different. They're in different forms, but they would form the exact same line. So let's graph it and see what this line would look like. So in slope-intercept form, I know it tells me the slope, and it tells me the y-intercept. So my slope is a negative 1/2. My y-intercept is 0, negative 4. So let's go put that on the graph. My y-intercept is at negative 4. So on the y-axis, I'm going to go down 4 and put a dot. Okay, remember, slope tells you how to rise over how to run. Okay, notice your slope is negative, so instead of going up, I'm going to go down 1 over 2. Put a new dot. Do it again from here. Down 1 over 2. And I'm just going to repeat that until I'm out of room. Okay, so I have no more room to move forward, so I'm going to move backwards. I'm going to put it in reverse. So remember, when you put it in reverse, you do everything opposite. So instead of going down 1, right 2, I'm going to go up 1, back 2, up 1, back 2. Okay, so line your points up with the straight edge and go ahead and draw your line to, that's a bad line. Still a bad line, but let me try again one more time. Good enough. Okay, so once you have a good line drawn, you can see where it crosses the x-axis. I see that it crosses the x right here at negative 8. So my x-intercept is at negative 8, 0. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a trick. So over here on these examples, if I was trying to figure out the x-intercept, we did a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so first we wrote our equation in point-slope form. Then we had to convert it to slope-intercept form. We used the slope and the y-intercept to graph it so we could see where it crosses the x-axis. So I'm going to show you a shortcut how we can go straight from this equation to finding the x-intercept. Okay, we're going to use that, do that by using graphing in our calculator. Okay, so here's our equation. Y minus 4 equals negative 1 times x plus 2. All right. I want to make this bigger. And I'm going to go graph this guy. So I'm going to go home. I'm going to add a new document. Never save. I'm going to add a graph. Okay, well, we know that this guy right here means y equals. Well, our equation says y minus 4 equals, which is different. So I can't use this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this equal sign, and this box pops up. I'm going to choose relation. When I choose relation, this entire box goes empty. So now I can type this equation exactly as I see it. So y minus 4 equals negative 1 parentheses x plus 2 close parentheses enter. Okay, the only bad thing about relation is we cannot open the table, so Control T doesn't do it. But we can still use trace. Menu, trace, graph trace, menu 5-1. Remember, when you use trace, it usually starts on top of the y-axis, so this is my y-intercept right here. So I can go ahead and write that down. So we have our y-intercept. But I'm trying to find my x-intercept, which is on top of the x-axis, which would be here. So I'm going to use this right arrow key until I'm on top of the x-axis. Remember that word 0 will pop up because 0 is just another word for x-intercept. So my 0 is at 2, 0, your x-intercept. So that's a nice little trick. So remember, you can graph your equation in relation and use trace to find your x and y intercepts. Okay, so on example 6 it says find the x and y intercept of the line that goes through the point 3, 3 and has a slope of 1/2. Okay, so we're still going to use the shortcut on this one, but it doesn't give us the equation. So before we can graph, we have to have an equation. So I know we write y, and we look at the y value of our point. The y value of our point is a positive 3, so I'm going to write minus 3. Then we put an equal sign followed by our slope. Parenthesis x. After we write x, we look at the x of our point, which is a positive 3, so I'm going to write minus 3. Okay, so now that we have our equation, let's go graph this guy. So I'm going to add a new document, start over, new problem, new document. Remember, this means y equals. Well, that says y minus 3 equals, not the same, so I don't want this. I delete the equal sign, choose relation. Now that it's blank, I can type it in exactly. Y minus 3 equals, control divide, 1/2. Make sure you put your cursor behind your fraction. Then open your parentheses, x minus 3, close parentheses, enter. Okay, so to find our x and our y intercepts, we use trace. Menu 5-1. Notice it usually always starts on top of the y-axis, so this is my y-intercept. Okay, now I want to go to my x-intercept. So on top of the x-axis, it crosses it right here. So I'm going to use the left arrow until that word 0. Remember, 0 and x-intercept mean the same thing. There it is. All right, so here's my x-intercept. All right, bye y'all.